Live from Liverpool, the Dark Paranormal, Season 14. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Paranormal Season 14. It seems like a true age since I've last spoken to you, and I cannot wait to dive into this season's paranormal true experiences. And we're going to start as we mean to go on today on episode 1. We have one hell of a listener experience. Universities can be one of those places which is seen as a transformational centre. The youth enters, the adult leaves. But as we hear today, the excitement of those new social activities, the adventures of meeting new people and growing as a person can all be replaced by something much more nefarious. However, before we go into today's true paranormal experiences, 2 quick things to mention. Firstly, forgive my voice, I'm coming off the back of a very bad cold. And 2, a huge thank you to each and every one of you for your support since the very inception of the show. This show does not work without your submissions, and we've received a plethora for season 14. And I guarantee there are some amazing tales to be told. But as ever, we always reserve 1 or 2 spaces for some of the last-minute people and experiences that we receive during the season. So, if you've been sat on an experience that you believe would be a good fit for the Dark Paranormal, then please email contact@thedarkparanormal.com. And finally, we need to give a big thank you to the team that make all of this possible. I'm talking, of course, about our wonderful paranormal community over on Patreon. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've been members of Patreon forums, etc. to do with the paranormal. I'm not just a host, I'm a fan of the entire genre. And from absolute experience, I can solidly and safely say our paranormal community on Patreon is one of the most supportive ones out there. There are no proclaimed experts on there. Everyone is just there to both support each other and enjoy the paranormal. By joining our community, not only do you receive both these shows and the minisodes ad-free and before everyone else, but you can also receive access to the Patreon-only podcast Dark Bites, where every week, every single Sunday of the year, we take a look at some of the shorter experiences that have been submitted for the Dark Paranormal. And you may well think, well, we now have minisodes, so I don't see the point. The stories on Dark Bites remain on Dark Bites. They will never be heard on the main feed. Plus, there's well over 50 hours worth of unheard content over on Dark Bites. We truly have built a wonderful community over there, and we'd love to extend an exclusive invitation just for you. So why not treat yourself in the new year? Head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. Just like the following wonderful new team members have: Teddy Mawafa, Antoinette Sperato, Nicole Kalari, Ben Waters, Alyssa, Amy Leather, Marissa M, Dee, Melinda Lynn, Pascal Quintero, Laura Gunn, Lauren Crummy, Paddy Barco, Katie, Laura Snyder, Christy Werner, Vive Foxley, Crystal Tongai, Brad Howard, Danita Kelly, JY Kuo, Jody, Maddie McGee, Sean Wheel, Victoria Panico, Hannah Boz, Leslie Horniak, Lucy, Sarah Ross, Harold Taylor, Alex Ferguson, Paul Z, Katie Morford, Irish Wristwatch, Kiani Laranger, Katie Nifton, Fellow Scouser, Andreas Frangos, Would You, Cosmic Cat, Ruth Milliken, Amy Marge, Chandler, Pam MacDonald, Mary Malcolm Sanders, and Bobby Thompson. Thank you so much, guys. Your support truly means the world, and I hope you enjoy all the early ad-free releases and, of course, those Dark Bites episodes. Now, I appreciate what I'm about to say will take me over the thing I'm about to say, but I just want to very quickly, in episode 1 of season 14, state that a lot of people have got in touch to say, must you put the Patreon names at the start? And quite simply, yes, because I truly am thankful and I want them to hear their name at the start of the show. I'm aware there are other shows out there who claim to jump right into stories and get right into the product, but then will 3 or 4 times throughout try and sell you some merch from their store. Now, we don't do that. So going forward, we're going to keep our intro, including Patreon thank yous, under 5 minutes. So, therefore, obviously this episode excluded because of this sentence, but if you skip forward for any future episodes to the 5-minute mark, you can go right into that paranormal experience. And other than the scheduled midpoint advert, which we have in every podcast, there will be no other plugging from me about any sort of merch or things like that. So you can just enjoy the experience. Okay? So remember, 5 minutes in and you're good to go. So with all that out of the way, it only leaves me to say one sentence. And I've waited literally since last year to say this sentence. Pardon the awful joke. However, please do lower the lights, make yourself comfortable, and of course, leave your disbelief at the door as we hear all about an education of darkness. Hi, Kevin. Hearing other people's stories and having the smallest of details mirror what I have experienced has not only given me chills, but has also made me rethink what this thing may have been. I don't mind my name being out there, as I'm fairly open about this experience with anyone who asks. Same with the location. However, other people within this experience are either unnamed or their names have been changed for privacy. My name is Sydney, and my true paranormal experience started on my first night at university. I grew up in an extremely religious home. For example, we couldn't listen to non-Christian music. We went to church every week at least once, and we said grace before every meal. Even as a young child, I remember feeling uneasy about the whole God thing. Perhaps it was because my stepfather, the most religious of us all, was in my mind a hypocrite. Oh, he would volunteer at church several nights a week, and he was the main driving factor to our sheltered upbringing. But he was not a nice man. On the outside, he appeared to be the perfect Christian father. But behind closed doors, he was a truly evil man. My sisters and I suffered abuse in every sense of the word. Do with that what you will, it's not the focus of this tale. And if it makes your listeners feel any better, we did get our justice. All of that is to say, I turned away from Christianity at a young age, and I started to branch out to other beliefs, pagan, spiritual-based. I read every book I could get my hands on, thanks to some sweet librarians who knew I needed something to escape what was going on at home. I also knew from a young age that I wanted to move as far away from home as I possibly could, to escape or explore or both. When it was time for college, I was all set for Northern California, Humboldt State. Being from Washington State, it was a solid 20-hour drive, and I decided that was far enough. I even sent them a non-refundable fee of $200 for housing. I'd had my heart set on that school for the last 2 years. And that's why it was shocking to me, and also my mother, when I randomly opened an email from Hawaii Pacific University, and I decided to apply. Even now, I don't really know why. I was so excited to go to Humboldt, but I did, and they offered me a better scholarship. Now, being frugal and also not well off, it seemed the decision was made itself that I would go to Hawaii. They had the same degree I wanted, and I would be even further away. So the deal was sealed. I signed up for housing once again, and was delighted to see that I, out of the luck of the draw, had a room to myself. You see, this university had two locations for housing. Firstly, the old housing in Kanahoe. That was a 3-story brick building in the middle of a very heavily forested area. And the other was a brand new construction in downtown Honolulu, with lofts and walkable access to restaurants. Well, you can guess where most of the students wanted to stay. Fine by me. I loved the forested area. It was both cheaper and breathtakingly beautiful. I've always been interested in history, and so moving from Washington State to Hawaii, I felt I should brush up on my history before arriving. American schools brush over the so-called annexation of Hawaii. And if you're unaware, you really should read into it. I felt that to be respectful as a temporary inhabitant of the islands, I should at least know their history, pre- and post-Western intervention. In my search, I came upon the Battle of Nu'uanu. At the end of the battle, King Kamehameha I forced the Oahu warrior off the sheer cliff face. This location, now known as the Pali Lookout, was directly across the highway from my new campus. I didn't recognize this proximity until some friends and I hiked up the closed highway from our campus to the lookout on the 3rd day of university. The first 5 days upon arriving at the university, we didn't have any classes. Instead, we were supposed to have an orientation. That started the first full day after the remainder of the freshman class had arrived. The day of arrival was pretty chill, mostly consisting of students finding their dorms, gathering packages and luggage, and setting up their rooms. As previously mentioned, I was not assigned a roommate, but I did have suite mates. You see, each building had 3 levels, with a staircase running up the centre of the building. Going upstairs, you'd be greeted by the open plan of the 2nd and 3rd floors. The 2nd floor did not have a ceiling, but resembled an atrium with a small couch, table, chairs, with a huge mural on the back wall. If you go up to the 3rd floor, there was a railing to keep you from falling to the 2nd floor, and a walkway from the stairs leading to both sides of the floor. Most rooms had 2 people, so each suite would include 4 people, 2 per room, joined by their bathroom. My bathroom was the second to the left, room 302. My suite only had 3 people, myself and the 2 girls who lived in the room across from our bathroom. We got on okay to begin with, and we went our separate ways to set our stuff up. A few hours later, and most of the parents and my mum had either left for their hotel rooms or left the island completely, as there was a hurricane predicted to hit. So a few hours goes by, and there's a knock on my door. I answered it, and there's a young woman, another student, who says that some of them are playing cards and wondered if I'd like to join. Well, I decided it would be good socially to go places when I'm asked, and so I stepped out of my room to join them. Once again, the view once my door was open was clear all the way to the other rooms on the other side of the floor and down to the second floor. I could see them all sitting and playing cards, and we all got to know each other a bit and eventually headed back to our own rooms. Tired from travelling and moving all my things up 3 flights of stairs, I went to sleep pretty early. I remember falling asleep very easily, what with my mind racing with thoughts of this new place, new adventures. And then I was rudely interrupted by 3 very loud, very hurried knocks on my door. It was exceptionally dark in my room, so I checked my phone for the time. 3 a.m. exactly. I thought it must be some of the other students checking to see if anyone wanted to hang out, or even just someone playing a prank. I was kind of irritated to be woken like that, so I decided to tell the person to go away and that I wanted sleep. I got out of bed, unlocked the door and swung it open, only for no one to be there. Even better, the whole 3rd and 2nd floor were dark and quiet. I stepped into the hallway and asked, "Hello?" in an annoyed tone, still expecting it to be the boys across the hall, or maybe my sweet mates playing a joke. But as I walked into the hall, the motion lights came on, illuminating the 3rd floor, and allowing me to see into the dimly lit 2nd floor, where everyone's doors were clearly closed. Weird, I think to myself, and I go back to my room and fall asleep, thinking it's just a new place, there are new places that have sounds, but still, it made me feel slightly uneasy that the lights did not turn on until I exited my room. If someone had knocked on my door, how did they avoid setting off the lights? Next morning at breakfast, I casually asked everyone what time they'd gone to sleep, but everyone had also gone to sleep fairly early, or just watched shows on their laptops in bed. Later the 2nd day, we had a bit of an orientation, before the whole thing was cancelled due to the incoming hurricane. So we were all sent back to our dorms to wait it out. Except freshmen in a new place, recently free of their parents, well, they're not good at being responsible. So a group of us decided, since the highway was closed, we should all walk up to this lookout that some of us had passed on the way in. That is, before the flooding caused it to close. Once we got to the top, I realised this was the site I'd read about, where an unknown number of soldiers were forced off this cliff. I suddenly had a weird feeling about all of us being up there having a laugh, where so many people had died. Luckily, everyone was ready to leave soon, as it was getting very cold, it being the windiest spot on the island, especially in bad weather. So any weird feelings fell away as we walked back to the dorms. We went on to play pool, air hockey, etc., and I made good friends with a girl who lived on my floor but across the way from me. We'll call her Hannah. And one of the guys that lived in the large room on my floor. We'll call him John. We all hung out for a bit before, again, returning to our rooms and going to sleep. Once again, I fell asleep rather quickly and easily, exhausted from the day's hike. And once again, I was awoken by 3 loud knocks at my door. This time, I flipped over in bed. I grabbed my phone to check the time and, Surprise, surprise, 3 a.m. exactly. Quietly, I got out of bed and crept to my door to peer through the peephole. No one was there. I opened my door like I did the night before, and again, it was dark and quiet. No light illuminating under any of the doors that I could see. I shut my door and I went back to bed. In the morning, I asked the people that I'd made friends with if they'd been messing around with me at night. I know it sounded a little crazy when I continued on to say that both nights they'd been knocking at my door at 3 a.m. They both promised that they nor any of their roommates they knew were knocking on my door as a joke. I felt slightly crazy because I knew that it wasn't just building noise. They were clear, distinct knocks. These knocks would continue each night. I eventually got used to them. At the very first knock sound, my eyes would jolt open and I'd spin to the door, just to be greeted with a darkness looming beneath the door. Eventually, I stopped looking, knowing nothing would be there, save for the dark hallway. Classes started up and I made more friends and more social plans. The knocks at my door hardly bothered me, and I'd found some protective crystals as I unfinished packing. These gave me a sense of confidence from whatever it was that wished to do me harm, hoping it might be deterred. It wasn't until one day that I came back to my dorm and I went to unlock it that I noticed the room door was already unlocked. Which was weird because I always locked my main door, and the door to my room from the bathroom was always locked. So I walked in, chastising myself for not locking up, and that's when I noticed that some of the crystals that had been on my desk were no longer there. Most notably, my large chunk of black tourmaline, citrine, amethyst, an obsidian necklace. I double-checked the door to the bathroom and that was definitely locked. So if someone had come in, it would have had to been through the front door. And I just didn't seriously think that anyone would have done that. I know how that sounds, but honestly, the whole building was pretty cool with each other. We were just asked to borrow something. And it felt odd to me that the only things I had placed for protection were the things missing. If this were a human thief, then why not take my expensive brand name headphones, also sitting on the desk? I knew that something was off in this room, but I was genuinely too busy to care. And I do feel these things tend to go away if you ignore them. It's when you feed unseen things with your energy that they seem to stay. I should have also realized that you can open that path more than one way. For instance, maybe opening a door when you don't know what or who is on the other side. Let's take a quick break to talk to you about Factor. It's the holiday season. Everyone has far too much on their plate. And talking about plates, are you looking for a nutritious, flavorful meal to fuel you on these jam-packed days? Well, of course you are. And Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you eat well for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, during the holiday season, time is the most precious thing of all. And with Factor, you can cross meal prep off your list. Skip the grocery shopping, the chopping, the prepping, the cleaning up, and get Factor's fresh, never frozen meals delivered to your door. They're ready in just 2 minutes. All you need to do is heat and enjoy. Choose from over 35 chef-crafted meals every week that support a healthy lifestyle, meet your meal preferences, whether it's calorie smart, vegan, veggie, protein plus, and more wholesome options. This December, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals ready in 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. Head over to factormeals.com/darkparanormal50 and use code darkparanormal50 to get 50% off. That's code darkparanormal50 at factormeals.com/darkparanormal50 to get 50% off. Of course, I tried my best to ignore all the unexplainable instances, even as the knocks grew louder, harder, even as things began to be in different places than where I left them. It was a good few weeks later when I woke up early one morning, not because of a knocking on the door, but because of a pain in my side. It felt like there was something hard and cold stabbing me. I reached under my body and pulled out the missing pillar of black tourmaline. Confused, I got out of bed to see all of the missing items were placed on my bed. I was shocked. I checked both doors and they were both locked. I would have woken up if someone had been in my room. I just knew it. Remember the childhood I mentioned? If someone had even turned the door handle, I would have woken up. How had someone been able to sneak into my room and not only place the items on my bed whilst I slept, how on earth would they get that stone under me? I told my friends what happened with the missing items and how they'd been returned, and I got the feeling they thought I was making it up. I tried my hardest to ignore what was happening around me and not paint myself as the girl making up a ghost story. That's until the night I saw it. One of the girls, my now girlfriend, in my building had gotten some edibles and offered me and my friends some. We agreed and each split a cookie. But let me preface by saying we weren't stoned, we were just a bit goofy and giggly. Earlier in the day, I had my boyfriend over, and every time we had a visitor, we had to go and get them signed in. Without an overnight form, visitors needed to leave by 10 p.m. I guess on his way out the gate, he'd forgotten to check out with security, because right as we fell asleep watching our film, a security guard came pounding on my door and yelling for me to open the door. Well, I was a little hazy from the cookie and my little nap and was confused about what was happening. I looked around the room and I swear on my life, I saw a figure in my closet. The closets in the dorms were more of a recessed rectangle, with some drawers and a single beam to hang things on. There were no doors or anything to cover the area. And as I woke to the yelling of the security guard, my eyes were immediately drawn not to the door he was still pounding on, but on the closet facing the foot of my bed, because a spindly shadow figure came into view. My eyes could barely make out this form until I got to its head. It had no eyes, no features, but it was the general shape of a human head, if not oddly elongated and unnaturally bent to one side. I let out a small whimper, as I felt it staring back at me, and then was quickly snapped out of my staring gaze, realizing that my friend was begging me to open the door. As I looked away from her and glanced back to the closet, it was gone. So I went to the door, explained to the now very angry guard that my boyfriend had indeed gone. I opened the door and pointed at my friend. She's a girl who lives across the hall. We're just watching a movie. And he went on his way. My friend asked why I whimpered, and I told her that I'd seen something in my closet. I asked her if she'd seen it too, but she hadn't. But she did offer that if I wanted to, I could sleep in her room, because she also didn't have a roommate. I said I would be okay, and it was probably just from the cookie, and there was no reason to be alarmed. That was a lie, of course. I knew what I had seen, and I knew it was no figment of my imagination, because I felt it look at me. Some instincts haven't been lost in our modern world. We can all feel when something is staring a hole clean through us. I knew that I needed to clean the energy of the room, but I didn't know exactly what I was dealing with. So I placed some salt in the corners of the room. I put my fans on full blast to circulate the air and burnt small twigs of rosemary to cleanse the air before sweeping the salt from each corner into the center of the room. Disposing the used salt in a jar, I sealed the jar with some wax and went to throw it away. Soon after this was our December break, so I was away from the dorm for around a full month. Upon returning to the space, it definitely felt different, stagnant. I no longer woke to knocks at 3 a.m. I felt I'd successfully cleaned the space. That is, of course, before it started lashing out at everyone around me. My boyfriend at the time had an apartment in town, so on weekends I would stay with him and get away from the dorm life. One weekend, I just didn't want to go all the way down to his place, so he, instead, said he would come and stay at my dorm. It was annoying to fill out all the paperwork, so this wasn't a typical arrangement. We hung out, watched a movie, usual stuff, and then fell asleep. This particular night, my eyes darted open as I heard 3 slow but loud knocks on my door, and I sat up in bed. I felt more anxious than usual, as the knocks had never been so slow before. Not 5 seconds after I'd woken to look at the door, my boyfriend woke up gasping for air, grabbing at me and asking me what I'd done. I was confused, but when I looked at him, he was sweating, and his eyes were wide with fear. I asked him what was wrong, and he said that he was sleeping, and then suddenly he couldn't breathe. So he tried to readjust himself and couldn't. So he opened his eyes, and something dark and shadowy was on his chest, holding him down. He said it felt like the figure was staring at him, and that if he continued to look, he would literally die. But he also couldn't look away. He said the figure told him to go away before he saw me sit up in bed. Then the figure vanished, and he was finally released from its hold. I felt fear, actual fear, creep into me. Up until this point, I thought it was just me. anyone I told hadn't really believed me, and I hadn't told my boyfriend about any of this. I figured he wouldn't believe it, and I didn't want to seem crazy, but I hadn't told him of the knocks, or the missing items, or the figure I would sometimes see, sometimes not. And here he was, describing it back to me, but for some reason I didn't want to scare him. So I told him it was probably a bad dream, because the campus is kind of spooky when you arrive in the dark. But let's just say it was a long while before he came back. My friend John, that I mentioned earlier, lived with two other boys. One, a very religious boy, and one just generally annoying. Neither of them believed in the paranormal. John started to believe me when only a couple of days after he'd made fun of my boyfriend, when I was retelling the encounter, he told me his door had begun to open all on its own. Slowly, his door would creak open and then slam shut. His roommates now didn't believe either of us when we said we believed there was something in this building. John, myself, and some other people within the building started a group chat where we would text each other whenever our doors would move on their own, or things would go missing, or we'd have knocks on the door at night. I think we had about 3 or so reports in just a few weeks. There was one night that Hannah and I were watching a movie in my room, and we both felt a dark presence. Nothing exactly happened, but there was a distinct shift in the energy of the room. It went from jovial to fearful in the blink of an eye. We were both suddenly overcome with fear. Not wanting to disturb anything, we called John to come over and open our door and get us from across the hall. I don't know why I felt if someone else entered the equation, this thing would be thrown off enough to let us out of my room. But John's roommates thought us 3 were being ridiculous, and the annoying one said that he'd bought something from home just in case we started up with our ghost crap yet again. It was a small bird figurine, and when it detected motion, it would chirp. So he decided, in all of his wisdom, that if this thing was as present and as powerful as we'd said it was, then it would come to him if he antagonized it. The religious roommate did not love the idea of taunting evil into the room, but he was also kind of a pushover. I knew it was a bad idea, but it would also be kind of funny if his plan to prove us wrong backfired. And so, he set the bird in his room, facing the door, and we all stood behind the bird so as to not accidentally set it off. To lure the thing, John's roommate started making fun of it, mocking the stories that we'd all told him. At first, nothing happened. Their TV was playing the loading screen music to some video game they'd all been playing, but had paused for our ghost hunt. The first thing Hannah and I noticed is whilst he was mocking the being, the video game music stopped. We turned, and the TV was no longer on the loading screen, but had that old-timey, staticky fuzz on the screen. John and his religious roommate turned at our, "Oh." Then the lights went out. The roommate that had been berating the being stopped speaking. It was quiet for a small amount of time as all of our eyes fixed on the static screen. It suddenly went back to its loading screen, and we all jumped slightly at the noise. But in the background, we all slowly turned to the bird. No one was stood in front of it. But before all of our eyes, the door handle turned, and the door slowly started to open. It creaked even though it didn't typically creak, and then slowly shut with a small click. The lights flickered back on, and the birds stopped chirping. Needless to say, they stopped thinking I was crazy, and instead started calling me a witch. I got the feeling that this thing didn't want to hurt me, but it didn't like those around me. I tried to regularly cleanse my room and myself to keep this entity at bay, but I really didn't understand what it was. Soon after, I started working at a coffee shop, and I became really close with one of my co-workers. He told me to refer to him as my Hanai brother, an informal term for adopted family. He was just as interested in the paranormal and spirituality, myth, and the general human condition as I was. He taught me about his culture, and we would discuss our rituals and the differences between the two. I told him about the entity that seemed to be looming around me, and he said he could feel something around me. My brother was really the only person I could talk to about this entity freely, because he believed me unabashedly. We both considered ourselves sensitive to these things, and he told me that sometimes dark energies are attracted to people like us. I consulted with him on how to rid myself of it, as he'd had experiences with this sort of thing. He told me my best shot was to move and take nothing that originated from that place. No dust, no bugs, no plants. I would fully have to cleanse myself and my things of that place just to make sure it did not follow me. Well, the school year was coming to an end, and I was planning to move off campus for the next year anyway, so the timing was perfect. I got an apartment with some people from school and told them not to bring anything from the campus with them. A couple of weeks before I moved, I remember feeling a fragile sense of peace. Activity had died down for whatever reason, and I was moving almost directly across the island into the town. And I knew I was giving up the beautiful scenery and isolation to rid myself of this thing, but I'd also be closer to work. I don't know if it was later that same night or another just like it, but I awoke once more to 3 slow knocks. However, they were surprisingly quiet knocks. I reached for my phone to check the time, but I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't move any part of my body. As if guided by hands that were unseen and unfelt, my head tilted to face the closet. As my eyes adjusted, I saw my shadow man solidify in the shadows. Once again, even without discernible eyes, I felt it look into my eyes as its head tilted farther and farther to the side. At first, I was gripped with fear as its head moved to such an unnatural angle, and then the breath caught in my throat as it took a step towards me. It had never moved towards me, always disappearing moments after we locked eyes. But tonight, It took one spidery step towards me after another. As it got closer, it felt like a cold cloud slowly crept up to me and settled in my bones. The shadow man came to the edge of my bed and bent at the waist to put its shadowed face directly above mine before it laid down next to me. Oddly enough, fear left me as it laid down next to me. Even as I felt my body closest to it begin to freeze and shake from the cold. I don't know what it wanted with me, but I think it knew I was leaving, and I had no plans to allow it to follow. It felt like a goodbye of sorts, and for some reason, I almost felt bad for it. I could feel its loneliness. Eventually, God knows how, I fell asleep. When I awoke in the morning, the right side of my body, where it had been closest to, was cold as ice, and my memory foam mattress topper was frozen hard. I did move, and it didn't follow me. I won't say what I did to rid myself of any ties of this entity, because I do believe in the power of the unknown. If it doesn't know what I did, then the chances of it catching up to me are slim. In the months after I moved, I slowly fell out with the friends in university that experienced the occurrences, and I also broke up with my boyfriend after he cheated on me. Part of me now thinks that this thing latched onto me and was set to deter anyone who wished me harm. I'm 24 now, and I haven't felt or seen it since I was 19. There have been other very minor paranormal occurrences over the last couple of years, but nothing relating to my shadow man. Thanks for reading my experience. It was fun going back and finding the old group chats and videos we took to try and prove everything was real. I know this was a long experience, but hopefully you got some chills along the way. There are still times that now living over 2,000 miles away from room 302, I still wake up in the middle of the night and hesitate to focus clearly on the details in the shadows. Sincerely, Sydney. Wow. Thank you, Sydney, for opening season 14 with such an incredible experience. And I, for one, don't blame you in being a bit more precarious around anything to do with shadows. We chose this experience to open season 14 because it has many of what I like to call authenticators within. Things you simply wouldn't create if, say, your whole point was just to have your fictional tale read out on a podcast. So sincerely, Sydney, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for a great start to season 14. And don't forget, guys, we do have these floating spots within each season. So, if you have your own true paranormal experience that you think would suit the Dark Paranormal, email it over. contact@thedarkparanormal.com. So that wraps up our debut episode of season 14. A huge thank you to Sydney and a huge thank you to each and every one of you for choosing to spend your time with me here on your show, The Dark Paranormal. For our Patreons, I'll speak to you again on Sunday for another installment of Dark Bites. And for everyone, remember, when you're discussing the paranormal, always try and leave some of your disbelief at the door. And I'll see you next time, right here on The Dark Paranormal.